Before colonialism, India was the richest nation on earth. In 1700, at the height of the Mughal Empire, India accounted for 27% of the world economy, equal to all of Europe. This wealth was built on a vibrant, productive economy, not just royal treasures. Indian artisans and merchants were globally renowned, their textiles, silks and muslins legendary from Rome to China. Indian textiles were so valuable they served as a global currency. The financial system was advanced, with indigenous banks supporting vast trade networks. India excelled in shipbuilding and metallurgy. Its teak ships and wootz steel were world-class, even used by the British. This was a hub of innovation, not a backward society. Historical accounts suggest the average Indian peasant enjoyed a higher standard of living than their British counterpart. Wages were higher, goods more varied, and prosperity widespread. This immense wealth and industrial might drew European traders, not to civilize, but to profit. India was a global superpower, envied and targeted by outsiders. The story of colonialism begins with the plundering of this fabled land. The Mughal Empire's decline after Aurangzeb's death in 1707 fractured India into competing states. Regional rulers, desperate for power, invited European trading companies, especially the British East India Company, into their conflicts. The company exploited these divisions, offering military support in exchange for influence and territory. The turning point came at the Battle of Plassey in 1757, where Robert Clive's small force, aided by betrayal, defeated the Nawab of Bengal. The company gained vast revenues and became a territorial power. Using Indian money and soldiers, it systematically conquered state after state. The British didn't defeat a united India, they dismantled it piece by piece. Political fragmentation became the gateway to colonial domination. British rule marked the deliberate destruction of India's industries. Indian textiles, once unrivaled, were crushed by tariffs and bans, while British goods flooded the market duty-free. Weavers lost their livelihoods as cheap British cloth replaced their world-famous fabrics. Shipbuilding and steel suffered similar fates. Colonial laws crippled Indian ships, and wootz steel vanished under British imports and restrictive policies. The Arms Act even destroyed the market for Indian steel. In a few decades, India was transformed from a manufacturing giant to a supplier of raw materials. This was not free trade, it was economic warfare. The backbone of India's industrial economy was broken. The consequences would haunt generations. The collapse of industry forced millions of artisans into poverty, driving them to agriculture. India was forcibly turned into a land of cash crops, cotton, indigo, opium, grown for British industry, not Indian needs. Farmers were coerced through debt and taxation, often trapped in cycles of poverty. Food security vanished as land was diverted from grains to export crops. Brutal enforcement, like the indigo system, sparked revolts, but changed little. By the late 1800s, India was a classic colonial economy, impoverished, agrarian and dependent. The workshop of the world had become a vast, overworked farm. The British engineered a massive transfer of wealth from India to Britain, known as the Great Drain. After Plassey, the East India Company used Indian tax revenues to buy Indian goods for export. No British money needed. Under the Crown, this became institutionalised Indian taxes paid for British officials, military campaigns and home charges. Trillions of dollars worth of wealth was extracted, starving India of capital for its own development. The burden fell on Indian peasants. taxed to fund their own subjugation. Schools, hospitals and infrastructure were neglected as money flowed to London. This drain was the root of India's poverty and Britain's prosperity. The prosperity of Victorian Britain was built on India's impoverishment. The cost was measured in lost opportunities and deepening misery. Famines under British rule were not natural disasters, they were man-made. Traditional safety nets were dismantled and grain was exported from starving regions to maximise profits. The focus on cash crops left no buffer against food shortages. Peasants, crushed by taxes, sold everything to survive, only to starve. British officials refused to intervene, clinging to free market dogma as millions died. Between 30 and 35 million Indians perished in colonial famines, deaths by policy, not providence. These tragedies exposed the moral bankruptcy of the empire. The British built railways in India, but not for Indian benefit. Railways moved troops and raw materials for export, not food to the hungry. Financed by Indian taxpayers, they guaranteed profits for British investors while saddling India with debt. The railways accelerated exploitation, not development. Claims that they alleviated famine are false. Grain was shipped out, not distributed to the starving. Other gifts, like the legal system, served colonial interests, not Indian welfare. The unity Britain imposed was that of a prison, not a nation. These institutions were tools of control, not benevolence. Unlike earlier conquerors, the British never became part of India. Mughals and others settled, invested and assimilated, spending their wealth within India. The British remained outsiders, extracting wealth and sending it home. Their officials governed from afar, returning to Britain with fortunes earned at India's expense. This was not just another invasion, it was a relentless, institutionalized drain. Other empires left scars, but the British left a vacuum, draining India's vitality for nearly 2 centuries. The British conquest was uniquely extractive, unprecedented in scale and impact. Understanding this difference is key to grasping the true cost of colonialism. By 1947, India's share of the world economy had collapsed from 27% to just over 3%. Once a powerhouse, it was left impoverished, with life expectancy at 31 and literacy at 16%. The British policy of divide and rule culminated in partition. Millions displaced, up to 2 million dead. Colonialism left deep social and psychological scars, instilling a sense of inferiority and division. Yet, after independence, India began to rebuild. Democracy took root, and the economy grew, lifting millions from poverty. Today, India is a global player in technology, industry and science. The journey has been hard, but the progress is undeniable. Modern India's story is one of resilience and renewal. The nation has risen from the ruins of empire, reclaiming its place in the world.